Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see your faces and have you join us for this Ask Me Anything About Going Rural event. It's been a while in the planning, and we are delighted to be able to engage everyone in this very informal discussion. So we have some amazing panelists joining us tonight. My name is Carrie Krakowski. I'm the Practice Education Manager with UBC Health. I am also a dental hygiene practitioner for many, many years and do have rural and remote experience as well. I'd like to just begin by acknowledging that I am joining you as a white settler, gratefully joining you from the unceded ancestral territory of the Musqueam people. I live very close to the UBCV campus right now, but grew up mostly on the Click Lake Tenay territory, in around Prince George, and moved to down south about 14 and a half years ago when I was 8.5 months pregnant. Anyway, I'm delighted to be joining you tonight, and I'd like to just start by introducing, actually allowing our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with Olivia because you're first in my Hollywood Squares. Olivia, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Olivia. I'm a third-year kinesiology student, and I was living in Nishka this summer with Change BC. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks very much, Olivia. Carmela, over to you.
Evening, everyone. My name is Carmela. I am a Master's of Kinesiology student graduating this month. That's very exciting. And I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Snunaeum people.
Thank you, Carmela. And over to Cassidy.
Hi, my name is Cassidy. I'm a second-year speech language pathology student, and I spent last summer, July and August, in Vernon, BC, doing a placement.
Thank you, Cassidy. So lovely to have you. And Lindsay.
Hi, I'm a third-year midwifery student, and I'm currently placed in Williams Lake.
Welcome, Lindsay. And last but not least, but Tara.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tara. I am a practicing pharmacist who is currently based in Fort St. John, which is up in the northeast corner of BC, but I've had placements everywhere from Penticton to Port Alberni all the way up to Powell River. Nice to see you all.
I think this is going to be a nice intimate conversation. So why don't we start off with Carmela and Olivia, and you can share a little bit about your experience in rural placements.
I'm Olivia, and Carmela is also a kinesiologist, and we're going to be telling you a little bit more about our experience up north.
And I already kind of introduced myself. I'm a kinesiologist. I'm finishing up my master's. And I'm from originally Nanaimo, which is where I am right now. But I plan to move to Terrace after Olivia and I did the same work-learn program this past summer. We both really enjoyed our time. So I'm actually planning to move to Terrace, and that's where I was located.
And as you all know, I'm Olivia. I'm originally from Calgary, Alberta, and I am hoping to actually move back up north after our summer placement. And after I graduate, of course. I'll let Carmela take this part away.
Yeah, of course. I love this. I feel like they always said this when we were in meetings up north, but where we worked and played, because what we both found about working in the Pacific Northwest over the summer is that it's truly a playground if you love outdoor activities. But we were in the Pacific Northwest. Olivia was in the Nisga'a Nation. I was in Terrace for 3.5 months. Terrace was quite a bit of a change from me. I'm used to a population of about 100,000, and Terrace was 10,000 people, but it was considered big for the north, which was interesting. But I actually found that adaptation not too bad. There's some statistics about Terrace. Olivia, I don't know if you want to talk about Nisga'a.
Yeah, so Nishka is about an hour to an hour and a half away from Terrace, depending on which village you live in. It's made of 4 villages. So the names are Gitlek Damix, Gitwinstilk, Lakalsap, and Kinkola. It's about 2,000-ish residents spread across the 4 villages. The largest villages get academics, and that has about 800 residents. The smallest villages being around 200. And I think what's really important to outline for Nisga'a is that it's a sovereign nation.
Yeah, and oh, there, that's good.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was like, oh, we wanted to include this map, and I think in preparation for our time in the summer, we knew we were going north, and we knew it was far. But after our travels, and actually, I drove up there originally to get some equipment up there, and it was quite a long drive, and you really realize how distant certain places are from each other, and how much different that makes your experience and what you're trying to implement in terms of healthcare. So.
Awesome. So quickly explain a little bit about what we were doing this summer. So Carmela and I were both part of Change BC, which is a 1-year multidisciplinary approach to prevent and treat patients who have metabolic syndrome. So that's a combination of things such as like high blood pressure, diabetes, high blood fats, such as like high triglycerides, and high BMI. Or obesity. And so with Change BC, it's actually an exercise and diet intervention in primary care. So we were working on a team with one family physician in different clinics, and then also with a dietitian to see a number of patients this summer. And so month 1 to 3 of this program is usually a weekly visit with their kinesiologist and dietitian. And then month 4 to 12 is monthly visits. However, with that being said, we are currently in month 5, and we still see our patients weekly, just because of circumstance, which is awesome. So we've been really, really fortunate to stay in touch with our patients since May/June.
Yeah, I think so I'll talk a little bit about Terrace, and just to touch on the Change program, it was nice because it was an opportunity for kinesiology students to learn their own practice, but then also to work alongside a registered dietitian as well as closely with the family physician. And during our time, we're only able to work with one registered dietitian, but we do hear that now, as things are building momentum, we're going to have one dietetic student come up. So that was really good news, good learning experience for them, but then also more help for us. So that was really awesome to hear. Okay, but let me talk a little bit about Terrace. I told you guys about the size of it, so about 10,000 people. It was, for me, what I found was big enough, but still feeling small. You could drive from end to end in the town in less than 10 minutes, maybe 7, and no traffic. And I'm a big lover of the outdoors, so hikes, fishing. I hear that in the wintertime, there's a close by mountain, Mount Shame, so I'm excited to take advantage of that. But it's nice because people in Terrace mentioned this to me originally. It's big, small. It has some of those luxuries. If you like the feeling of a city, there are some restaurants. There is one pub, but it's a good pub. And it has kind of your bigger chain grocery stores like a Walmart and a Save on Foods and like a Mark's Warehouse, and a Canadian Tire. So you can get most things that you need. But it still has that same feeling that you're not in a big city. And what I really like is that there's no traffic, and that was a big one for me. So yeah, these are some of my favorite pictures from Terrace. I ended up finding myself living on a farm, and I really enjoyed that. So one of the cultures that I felt really strongly in Terrace was that people love to live off the land. They take advantage of every season, and like I said, they go fishing, but then currently we're at the end of some of the hunting season. People are very much into foraging and trying to make the most of the land that they live on. So meeting other people who were into things like farming, that was nice to learn from, and foraging. So I always felt like I was learning from people that I was running into and meeting in Terrace, but not feeling disconnected. So there's enough people to feel connected and learn from, but if you like the feeling of a small space, and you still get that as well. So I really enjoyed that about Terrace. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about my experience in Nisga'a. And I think I could spend probably an hour explaining my experience and telling people about it, but I'll try and summarize it here in just a few short minutes. But essentially, for me, it was completely different because I've never lived in a place less than 1 million people. And so it was a big adjustment going to a place where there's only 800 people in the place that I was living, with a total of 2,000 residents. But I loved the landscape. And what I loved most about it was actually the people. Everybody was super kind-hearted, extremely warm, and so giving. And so it's just an amazing community to be in for the summer. What's really beautiful about Nisga'a is that it literally has everything. It has lava beds. Like, who knew there were lava beds in BC? And once upon a time, an active volcano. So I thought that was a really interesting. But it also has a river, forest, mountains, and the ocean. So it really has it all. I think in regards to the work and what it's like to actually like work there, it was really interesting seeing how the community functions, because Carmela mentioned, like, you know, there's the amenities that come with a city in Terrace, which was the closest city to Nisga'a, but there's no grocery stores. When I first looked at Google Maps in April, when I found out I was going to Nisga'a, I saw like 74 buildings. I could literally count the number on Google Maps. I was like, okay, there's 74. And I think like 4 of those maybe aren't houses. So it was just a big adjustment, but it was awesome. They had community centers, which doubled as their recreation centers in each of the communities. So that was really great, that there's a community hub and a space that pretty much everything sort of operates out of. In regards to healthcare specifically, there are health centers in each village. However, the scale and what's available in each of those health centers is very different. I think I can explain more come the panel, and I don't want to take up too much time, but essentially it was just extremely gratifying to be up there. And you'll see in some of the photos, like here's some of the landscapes. There's literally no filters on these. This is just what it looks like and how beautiful it is. And I was fortunate to be up there with one other student, kinesiologist too, who's in their 5th year. So for the 2 of us as undergraduate students to have this experience was absolutely amazing and incredible. And I hope I can share more with you tonight in some of the questions.
Go first. Quick rundown of our highlights. I think Olivia said there's so many things that we could talk about our experience, because we're both, well, on our way to, or have our sights set on moving back to where our placements were. So I think that speaks for itself. But in terms of my highlights for the summer, were all of the students I got to work with. I've been in other programs where you get to work alongside people for a certain amount of time, but I do really feel like the bonds that I made with the students who I went with the summer were very special. And that was because we all got to experience something completely new and just grow together and really make an impact on the learning of each other, but then of the communities themselves. I think the most rewarding thing that I felt throughout the summer was in these smaller communities, you feel really big impact. And I found that when I was doing my master's in Vancouver, sometimes it's easy to feel small and lost in the big sea of people, or at UBC. But I felt like as soon as you made good in someone's day from your work, it almost like it rippled through the city, and then you felt that. And I really enjoyed that. So that was one of my highlights. And the biggest highlight was that kinesiology as a profession was able to make some big bounds, and we were happily able to say that we can offer this care more readily to all of the population of Terrace in the coming months. So that was really good.
Yeah. And for myself, like echoing a lot of what Carmela said, but perhaps just a little bit different, is that for us, in being kind of close to Nisga'a, I lived there and Carmela was close. We were able to experience a lot of the cultural pieces of the Nisga'a people. So in the photos, you'll see that we got to actually learn how to can salmon, and Truman was the other student I was with. He learned how to fish with some of the people there. So it was really great just being able to embed ourselves into the community and get to learn something new about BC and about Canada that we had never been able to experience before. In the far right picture, you'll also see we're holding cedar. So we actually learned how to strip cedar, which is something they use to make different items, be it baskets or hats, part of their culture. On the work side of things, though, I think what I really like most about small communities is that there's this pragmatic, like healthcare is what I call it, is that like you just do what you need to do. And then I hope this doesn't get me into trouble, but you kind of like ask for forgiveness later. But in almost every healthcare worker I came across up north, especially in Nisga'a, it was like, just do what you can to help the people that you're trying to serve. And we'll deal with things later. And I personally really like that because that's definitely my style. So that's what I like so much about being up north, and of course the outdoors. And as you can see, like on one of our hikes, like that was the view that we got all day, every day. So there's really, it doesn't get much better than that. And it was awesome. Yeah. And that kind of summarizes our experience up north this summer in regards to kinesiology. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Olivia and Carmela. That's probably, I don't know, the third time I've heard you guys present, and yeah, I always learn something each time you present. So thank you. The insights are great. Why don't we shift gears a little bit, and maybe I'll put Lindsay on the spot. Lindsay, you can talk a little bit about your experience and maybe tell us a little bit about how it contrasts with your previous lived experience. So.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a third year midwifery student. So this is my second year of placement. Last year, I was placed at an alternative practice arrangement in Port Moody, which served a wide array of clients, and deliveries were at RCH in New West, which is where I lived. So there was a huge lack of continuity, and I think it was Carmela who just said, you kind of get lost in a sea of people. And because there were so many student midwives who were also practicing out of RCH, you kind of got lost in the sea of student midwives. And you always worked with a different nurse every shift that you worked on. The OB didn't know your name. Yeah, so it was difficult to build a rapport just because of how many people work at that place. So this year, I'm placed in Williams Lake with Caribou Midwives, which is a team of 2 midwives, which again is different from last year. Last year, there was 12 midwives on the team, plus family physicians and RNs and OBs. So this year, there's 2 midwives, my preceptor and a new registrant. So volume is a little bit lower, but the continuity has been so valuable to my learning. Every birth that I've attended, I've known the person and I've known them well, and I know their kids and their partner and their family, and I've had the chance to build a rapport with them, and like to get to really know them and how best to serve them during their birth experience, but also in their postpartum experience. The practice is new. So it's only a couple years old. So it's this is the first time that there's been midwifery here in Williams Lake. And the community has really kind of like embraced midwifery and helped it to become super successful. And it's also very fulfilling to hear from clients who this is their first time that they've had a baby with midwifery care. And how different it's been from previous experiences. What else? So Williams Lake has about 10,000 people, but it serves a population of about 30,000. So we get lots of clients who aren't from town, but come to town specifically to access midwifery care. So they come a couple of weeks before their due date, stay with a family member or at a hotel for a couple of weeks, and then a couple of weeks postpartum before they head home. So that's really special to know that people value the kind of care that we're able to offer them that's different from family physicians or obstetricians. As far as being a member of the team on the unit at the hospital, they welcomed me as a member right off the bat. I've gone for dinner at one of the OB's house already because he's also the other midwife's father-in-law, because we live in a small town and that's just how it is. So they've been very welcoming. And I think one of the things that has helped the transition from New West to Williams Lake is getting involved in the community. I'm a volunteer with Girl Guides. You can see I'm getting ready to run there as soon as this panel is over. So it's just, I guess, continuity again in my life. helping me transition from one place to another. And I'm also from a small town. So I'm from Newfoundland. The town that I grew up in is has a population of less than 2,500 people. So the transition to New Westminster was a little bit more challenging than what it's been to Williams Lake. Yeah, I think that's it for me for now.
Thank you, Lindsay. That is great to hear. I'm hearing some themes already across the presentations, and it's just so neat to hear about how welcomed you feel and how you've been able to integrate into the healthcare team there. And then, as you said, midwifery is fairly new to Williams Lake. And so is NP, actually fairly new to Williams Lake. And there's a new practice, a fairly new practice there as well. So it's super neat to see how all the healthcare professions are integrating. So thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm going to move it over to Cassidy next, and then we'll hear from Tara. Cassidy, take it away. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll share about my experiences in Vernon last summer. I did 7 weeks. It was totally new for me. Before living in Vancouver, I lived in Toronto, and I've always relied on public transit. I don't drive, which is an important detail for getting around Vernon, where my closest grocery store was like 35 minutes walking. There wasn't really a bus. And then adding 40-degree weather is a bit challenging, but I'll speak more on that in a second. So I was with the public health unit, which serves children 0 to 5 with speech intervention services. I guess we're in a unique position in that sometimes we're the first professionals to identify differences, like neurodiverse differences like autism in children and families. And then being in Vernon in a smaller place, the community that also worked with those children is very close. We were connected with the Boys and Girls Club to do playgroups and to bring parents together, as well as the Friendship Center for some parents who felt more comfortable there rather than the medical office with their child. I guess living in Vernon, I had the best landlord I've ever had in my life. They kept making me barbecue, like every weekend. They invited me for barbecue, which I just feel like that would never happen in Vancouver. They also took me with their kids to Okanagan Lake, and they took me paddleboarding, just because I think they knew that I was a bit lonely, and without a car, I was a bit limited with my weekend activities. And then also my clinical educators, I had 2 people that I was shadowing, and knowing that I didn't have a car, they took me grocery shopping on our slower days. And it was just a really nice sense of community that I hadn't yet felt in Vancouver.
Can you tell us a little bit about Vernon? You mentioned the weather. Maybe you can talk about, some of the other, I guess, facilities or attractions or whatever you think.
Yeah. I remember I really liked going to this one coffee shop in town. There was just a couple, and I spent a lot of time at Okanagan Lake. They even have the rent scooters. So I would rent a scooter and go back and forth to the lake. And that's kind of what I spend my weekends doing.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Oh, Lindsay just posted her landlord dropped off a fresh bag of roasted coffee this morning. When does that happen, right? Yeah, I know. It's amazing. I'm glad that you had that experience of being really welcomed, Cassidy. I personally love Vernon. Just experienced that a couple of months ago with a girlfriend's reunion. We actually met near Oyama, which is a little bit outside of Vernon, but beautiful area. And thank you very much. Tara, over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, so like I said, I am a practicing pharmacist at the Fort St. John Hospital. Fort St. John is almost right on the Albertan and British Columbian borders, a city of around 20,000 people. And we have a city that is really close to us. It's about 15,000 people, and that's called Dawson Creek. So the 2 cities kind of make up the northeastern region. And I had originally completed a pharmacy residency in Prince George, but prior to that, I had spent most of my life in Vancouver. So it was a big change. And then I really enjoy my Chinese food in Vancouver. So moving up to Fort St. John, where, I can go days and days without seeing another Asian person, that was definitely a challenge. But one of the nice things about living up here is that the cost of living is so low that I can essentially fly back to Vancouver every month and still be coming out ahead. So, I just fly down to Vancouver every month and get all the ethnic food that I want, or I can drive over to Alberta and get all like my Asian food there and then bring it back up. But that's neither here nor there. So like working up here has been great because, as all of the other panelists have said, that there's a very strong sense of community here, both within and outside of my workplace. So just as an illustration, when I moved up here in August or July, when I moved up here in July, I was going to pick up some giant piece of furniture from someplace, and I have my little tiny SUV, obviously wasn't going to fit. And somebody else like across the street was like, hey, that piece of furniture is too big for your truck. I was like, well, I guess, it's too big for your car. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try my best to fit it in. They're like, no, like, let me get my truck. I'll put it in my truck and drive it, follow you back to your house and help you bring it back. I'm like, to me, that was amazing. Like, that was not something I would ever expect in Vancouver. And that was not something I would ever trust in Vancouver. Like, I might be a cynic, but in Vancouver, I'd be like, oh, is this person trying to steal the furniture that I'm trying to move? But like, that's not the sense of community here is like, that doesn't happen. And then another thing that really highlights working in a rural placement is the work-life balance as well. So like, I go to work at a certain time and I leave by a certain time, and work kind of stays at work. So I really get a chance to enjoy my life up here, and like lots of stuff to do outdoors, just like in Terrace. I feel like Fort St. John and Terrace are very similar cities, except we're we're on the opposite side of the Rockies. But another thing that's really nice is that the collaboration, the workplace is amazing. Like, I was just saying to Carrie before this session started, that I can literally walk into the dietitian's office or the occupational therapist's office at the hospital and just start talking about patients. Whereas if I were in Vancouver General, I might have to make like a formal referral. So that's been a very, very nice part of my practice so far. So I'll leave anything else for the questions later, but that's just kind of a small blurb about what my life here has been like so far.
Thank you, Tara. That's great. And I think we'll have, definitely some good discussion when we open up for questions. So I thought I would just open it up for questions. I do have some in my back pocket if the silence gets too long. So, okay, so has posted that she'd love to know about some of the challenges of working rurally.
As a pharmacist who, sometimes have to get really weird drugs in very strange places, I can definitely speak to this. So one of our big challenges is that the distance between population centers is so big up here in the north that getting supplies from one place to another, or like specialized equipment, specialized drugs from one place to another is tricky, especially in the winter, and especially out here in the Northeast where people have to essentially drive through the Rockies to get out here to the Northeast. So that's been a challenge. And then also just having to be mindful of where your patients are coming from. Like if you are having a patient who is driving to the hospital from reserve, like your discharge planning or your treatment plan might be very different from somebody who is living in your population center. And it definitely requires a degree of compromise and creativity to ensure that you are serving those patients in the best way you can.
Thank you very much for that, Tara. We have another question also. What were the difficulties transitioning to the new lifestyle after living in a big city?
I'll take a stab at that last one. Not quite as big as going back to Vancouver, but one thing that I found transitioning was it's a little bit kind of back into stimulus overload. Or I felt that what was important to what I felt the community of Terrace was different than Nanaimo, and people don't have time to they were too busy trying to make sure they had all their food for the winter. And I think back here, with there being more shops and more things to do and more places to go, a lot more monetary things to do with your time, it was hard adjusting to that and seeing how people chose to spend their time versus I found a lot of the patients or the community members that I became friends with, they had no choice but to spend their time doing things that they needed to get ready for the next season. And that just I found glaringly obvious when I came back to my hometown. And then it's the culture shock backwards. And then it's nice though to be able to have the comparison of the two. So that was just something that stood out to me.
Thanks, Carmela. The other panelists,
Maybe I'll quickly like touch on the first two questions, like about the challenges about working rurally and then also the transition. But in regards to there were lots of challenges I found for working rurally, but it might have been because I was in such a different community. And I think just for the sake of making sure that everybody kind of understands, but traditionally it would be what is called a reserve, but Nisga'a is not considered a reserve because they're sovereign. So that's why it's called community. But I found that there's lots of challenges in regards to socioeconomic status. Like lots of people were of a bit lower socioeconomic status. So even access for them getting to their appointments was really challenging because, you know, most of the healthcare workers live in the largest community, which would get academics, which could be an hour to an hour and a half away, depending on which village you lived in. And to ask them to come to an appointment when they don't have a car. So they had to like source their own transportation to even get to their appointment. So a lot of times people just don't show up because they couldn't get there. And so it's not because they're not motivated to show up or to come to their appointments. It's because they can't. So that's just an example of like one of the challenges that you face. And also for Carmela and I, because kinesiology, I think, is still a growing profession in healthcare, especially in public healthcare. I think it was sometimes challenging to advocate for space for kinesiologists. So a lot of the times, like I was doing a lot of sessions outside, which is not a bad thing when you're doing human movement and physical activity, but when you don't have the equipment necessary to really truly help somebody or the space to do so in a way that makes them feel like they're safe and that they're happy doing those things, it can be very challenging. So infrastructure, system level challenges, I think, are just things to consider. But again, there's so many positives. And as long as you're adaptable, creative, and you have a certain resilience about how you approach things, I think it'll be fine. And in regards to like the transition, like I said, I had never lived in a city smaller than 1 million people. So I'm like through and through a city girl. And so then, yeah, going down to a community with the 2,000 residents or 800 people was definitely an adjustment. And for example, like our closest grocery store is an hour-ish, hour and a half away. So it felt like I was constantly camping because like I would make a spreadsheet like every Saturday and meal plan for my week and be like, okay, what groceries do we need? How many pieces of bread are you going to eat this week? Because like, that's all you can eat because that's the limit. So yeah, just a kind of a little bit of a funny story about that. But yeah, it's an adjustment. But I think that as long as you do a little bit of research, kind of understand where you're going, it's definitely easy and possible to make that adjustment, just from my perspective.
Thank you both, Carmela and Olivia, and Tara. Any other folks from the panel want to pipe in? I think we'll move over to Lubna for a second. Lubna, you've got a couple questions in Slido.
Is finding a rural placement the same as the regular placement? So I'm going to assume they're talking about process. Is it hard to find a rural placement compared to urban centers? If you've done an urban placement, what did you find the differences in getting a placement?
I can answer this with regards to midwifery. So the midwifery placement system runs on a lottery, but you put in your preferences. So I had requested, and because I'm one of few of my classmates who don't have kids or a partner, I'm very flexible about where they send me. But I had requested to go rural because I plan on working rurally when I graduate. So,
Thanks.
but there are less midwives rurally because midwifery is only new in BC. It's only this year UBC midwifery is celebrating its 20th year. So there are fewer preceptors rurally.
Thanks for that, Lindsay. I'm going to jump in here because I conducted focus groups and interviews with more than 80 preceptors and students a couple of years ago, all rural. And this is what preceptors told me, the rural preceptors. They often will put out their availability for placements, but not get students. So this is one of the reasons why we're having this event, is to make people aware that, yes, in fact, there are rural placements, and many preceptors post their availability and multiple years in a row and don't get a student, and they're quite disappointed by that, actually. And so really do value having students and realize that that is part of building community capacity as well. So I would recommend talking with your faculty lead, the practice education lead. They are your best sort of disciplinary resource. And I'm happy to put you in touch with folks because I know all of them, but I'm sure you know them too.
How did you find getting housing for a short period of time? And related to that, how was finding housing for your rural placement?
Finding housing sucks, to be honest, especially in a small town where there are limited places for people to stay, especially short term. I have been very lucky to have stumbled upon my landlord is a physiotherapist and his wife is an x-ray tech. So they rent out their apartment short term to healthcare professionals. And the day that I found out I was coming to Williams Lake, I joined all the Williams Lake buy and sell rental groups on Facebook and posted and was like, I need a place to live. Somebody please help. And my landlord messaged me, and I did all the paperwork as soon as possible so that I could rent this place. But you kind of have to settle for rent and how much it costs, and shopping around doesn't really exist when you're looking for a place to live.
Thanks for
I have
that.
a really, sorry, just my story is really similar. I joined a Vernon housing group, and then someone had posted, oh, I'm looking for a student for short term in the summer. And I thought, oh, well, that's perfect. And it turns out that her office was next door to mine. So we could even carpool if we wanted together as well. So it was just a really good fit, kind of coincidentally.
Fantastic. Carmela, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'll chime in here in terms of housing. For our work on this past summer, we were lucky enough that housing was found for us. But just learning, trying to make the transition to terrace, how other people found housing. If you just go on Marketplace, it's quite scarce, and or whatever other sites. But what I did find is Facebook, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, is very common for communication. Sometimes in the cities they find Facebook quite dated, but that's where all the buzz happens. And just finding out where is that community page, what is the way that everyone, for the most part, it ends up being word of mouth. So your best way in is to know somebody and say, hey, I'm looking for a place and I'm not crazy. Can you try and ask around? And that will actually probably get you quite far. If you know somebody, or if you find the community Facebook group and post there, put a little bio of yourself and a picture, people will soak that up. And I think that's actually the best way. You have to put in a bit more effort to find your space. And it's that the people are actually, they have these rental spaces, but they don't want to post them and deal with all of the back and forth, especially terraces right on a highway. So they're worried about people transitioning and leaving and trashing the place. So you do have to do a bit more digging than maybe some other communities, but that was just my experience and things that I've heard from others who did placements in terrace.
Tara, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so like Camilla was alluding to, like knowing somebody is definitely helpful because these are close-knit communities, everybody knows everybody else, and you actually do know somebody in every community that you're going to. You know your preceptor, so you can always just let your preceptor know, hey, I'm looking for housing. And it's often worked out for me in my multiple rural placements that if my preceptor didn't know somebody, if my preceptor themselves didn't have a space for me, they often knew somebody else who did. And often what ends up happening is like you end up being able to kind of shadow somebody and kind of have a guide in living rurally, which is super nice. And then I found that housing was actually cheaper out in these smaller towns, even though the selection is smaller. And people really, really like using Kijiji up here in the north.
Definitely the rural context, they have their own, ways of communicating. And, like all of you said, the word of mouth is really powerful. And just to maybe jump off of something that Carmela said about putting yourself out there, we have a question in the chat about, do you ever get any pushback or distrust from locals because you're only popping in for a few weeks or months?
In regards to midwifery, the clients that you're dealing with are usually super excited to have a student who's interested in midwifery and also interested in being rural. So at this point, I haven't experienced any pushback because people are excited that people are coming to their community to learn and to share their expertise. Like the OBs have been super excited and the nurses have been super keen to help with my learning as well. So no pushback at this point.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Olivia, over to you.
I thought that this it smiled at this question because when we went to Nishka, which is an Indigenous community, I think what was a little bit challenging was that people didn't know we were coming, and so we got a lot of questions almost every day for the first few weeks, being like, why are you here? Who are you? And how long are you here for? What's going to happen when you leave? So there's just lots of questions. I think, and it was something we were really conscious of too, because we didn't want to necessarily be a colonizer in their healthcare system. So it was a really delicate balance. And I think we've tried to balance that by staying in touch with our patients, and we've offered to continue helping as much as we can virtually because we couldn't live there throughout the school year. But I also think it spoke volumes when we would try and integrate ourselves into the community. And I think that was almost 10,000 times more important than doing a successful exercise session for the first at least 8 weeks, like really showing face and really trying to integrate yourself into the community and really show that you're there to not only just provide the service, but you're trying to make the community better. I think took us a long way. So that is just something from my perspective.
Thanks, Olivia. Actually, I'm going to introduce the ROPE site. The Rural Opportunities for Practice Education actually has a section all on community integration and how important that is in terms of optimizing your experience from a clinician's perspective and also from a life balance and, just richness of experience. So as a resource, it is a site in progress right now, but the content is pretty much there and the links are there. So I invite all of you to check that out. The other question that's in the chat is, did you choose to go to rural placement, or was it initially much lower on your ranking, and did it meet or defy your expectations?
I think I would like to speak to this one. Actually, the first time I got placed in a rural placement was in Port Alberni, which is a little town on the western side of Vancouver Island. And I think when I saw the placement, the first reaction, when I saw where I was assigned to, because in pharmacy, you rank different locations and then they try to optimize it so that everybody gets something that they like. I've never even heard of Port Alberni before, so my first reaction was confusion, like, where the heck is this place? And I saw how small it was. I saw how far it was. I've never lived away from my parents before. I've had a very traditional, cloistered Chinese upbringing. So the second feeling that I had was devastation, because I did not think that I was going to have a good time. I grew up in the city. I love my Asian food. I love my computer. I can't abide by the slow internet. I was very upset. And I didn't know what to expect in a small town, like practicing pharmacy there, because all I've seen was the the overwhelming number of patients and amount of expectation that patients had for me in Vancouver. And I was also going to be living with my preceptor's coworker, which, as an introvert was terrifying. But Port Alberni, like the first week, I was there for a month. The first week was frankly a little scary because first of all, I had all this newfound freedom because oh my gosh, I can have Cheetos for dinner and there's nobody to stop me. And then the other thing was I had to force myself to get out and not just hide in my room the whole time. I had to force myself to get out and explore the town. I wasn't quite brave enough to go volunteering the town or whatever, but forcing myself to experience what the city has to offer, all the hiking, all the nature, and then starting to come to terms with the fact that my commute was only ever going to be 3 minutes driving or 15 minutes walking, and seeing herds of deer walk down the main road. So that was amazing. Definitely was not expecting that. I got terrified of bears when I was there because, again, never seen a bear before. And then just workplace wise, you feel so appreciated even when you're dropping in for just a few weeks, in that they're like, oh my gosh, we will use your skills as much as we can in the short time that you're here, and you get to see crazy things that you would never see in Vancouver. Somebody would walk in and have a crazy rash that they got from hiking, and they just kind of drop themselves on your pharmacy counter and pull off their shirt and show you. It's just that wouldn't happen in Vancouver. You don't see weird things like that. So definitely met and exceeded my expectations, but my expectations were quite low.
Sorry, you caught me. I was laughing there a little bit. That was thanks so much, Tara, for your candid honesty. It's refreshing to hear. Anyone else want to pipe in?
I can hop in really quick. To start, I was a little bit nervous because I didn't know very much about Nisga'a, and despite my very many efforts to use YouTube, Google, social media to try and find pictures and more information, it was a bit challenging. So I was scared because the things people were telling me, there's only one phone provider, you're going to be disconnected from the world. I was like, oh, okay, here we go. But yeah, absolutely defied all of my expectations. It was amazing, both from a lifestyle and personal standpoint to professional. And I feel like I've grown a lot as a student and hopefully as a future kinesiologist. And I could not advocate more for trying to at least go rural. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, that's okay too, but at least you had given it a shot. So that's just some advice.
Thanks so much, Olivia.
This is pretty program specific because we don't give any rankings whatsoever in speech pathology. So it was a total surprise. I was in Kelowna, and then I went to Vernon after for my second placement. And I remember thinking, regardless of whether I like it or not, it's temporary. And I can kind of experience living somewhere different than Vancouver, a city, kind of with the expectation that it's just going to end in a few months. And if I like it, I can work there after. And if I don't, I can try something else the next summer. So I like that feeling of giving it a shot, but not being tied to it for very long, for my program at least.
Yeah. Thanks, Cassidy. That's actually a great way to experience the world, is, really embed yourself into a community. That's my favorite way to travel, actually, is kind of off the beaten path. And this is an immersive experience off the beaten path. But there is another question in the chat. It's related to what we just talked about, but it's around finding your people in the community and in your practice. And does it feel harder in that the pool is smaller, or maybe easier because the pool is smaller?
I'll chime in here. So again, just for reference, so Terrace is about 10,000 people, and I thought that was a good enough size. And seeing that was big enough to have some subcultures of, if you wanted to find your social group, if you want some type of social support. Certainly some of the smaller communities that some of the other students might have gone to, they may not have had that option. And at that point, I do believe that it becomes a personality type thing. Like some people might be better suited or more used to having themselves and maybe another as their social support and circle. And some people really need that community support. So that's something that really can only figure out if you go to the space. And this is going to piggyback onto the last question, but if you're even just thinking about going rural, I think you should give it a try. It was nice this summer seeing the students who went up north this summer, and some of them definitely found out that rural was not their thing. And then some of us went there and found out that rural was our thing. But like Olivia said, we all grew as people. That was inevitable, I think. So it's definitely worth knowing or not knowing instead of being on the fence. So if you're thinking about it, just jump and do it. But if you're worried about, I think you have to do some introspection of what kind of person you are or what you need to feel supported in your community. If you like having a group, what are your interests? Does that town or city have kind of a hub for those interests? If not, yeah, or hobbyists or something like that. And if not, can you be happy with maybe having your coworkers as your friends if that's good for your work-life balance? So maybe some more introspection there if the size of the community you're going for can support what you need socially as a practitioner and how you balance your work-life balance.
Thanks, Carmela.
Speaking as somebody who is into some more niche subcultures, so like for example, I play Dungeons and Dragons, and my fiance also plays a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. They are also a pharmacist practicing for St. John. For St. John got 2 for 1 here. It definitely took a little bit of effort to find our board game and Dungeons and Dragon crew, because like I guess like we didn't know anybody before you came here. But a nice thing about having like a community that's so involved and like people who are so communicative with each other here is that all you have to do is kind of put your put yourself out there. So basically all I did was to go on Facebook and Reddit, and I just said, hey, we're moving to Fort St. John. We like Dungeons and Dragons. One of us can take on this key role in a Dungeons and Dragons game. Who's interested? And initially we thought there'd be no interest because our impression of Fort St. John is that it's a oil town where everybody's only into outdoorsy activities. But because we put ourselves out there and we said, hey, we're coming here, this is what we're interested in, these are the people we're looking for, there was so much response. Like there was an overwhelming response from the community that was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, like come here, do the Dungeons and Dragons campaign for us. We love it. So now every like 2 weeks out of every month, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons with people that we would have never met otherwise. So definitely easier to find people, because I find that in Vancouver, for example, everybody's so used to being like closed off to protect themselves and other people, but there's none of that guardedness here. So if you're genuine and express what you are and who you are, then people respond to that. And I really like that.
Thanks, Tara. That's fantastic. So you start your own subculture when it doesn't exist.
That's actually a really good point, Tara. Like you have the opportunity to be a bit of a trailblazer in those niche cultures. So if you can do that, like that might be your opportunity to spread and bring something new to the community, and they'll just take you in even more wholeheartedly for showing them something new. We've been saying a lot of positives, and something did come to mind about more of the social culture in the small communities is I became very aware of like the small town rumor mill is what everyone would refer to it as. So I think in the beginning, you're always kind, everyone's there with open arms, but then there is a certain time where you realize that the community is so small that everyone sort of knows each other and not everybody really likes each other all the time. So just knowing how to navigate those as in a small community, and if you build that rapport, then they start opening up to you about their opinions and all that, and knowing where to place yourself as a practitioner, but then also as a member of that community was something that I had to be more aware of as I integrated myself more and more. So that's just maybe not necessarily a caveat, but something you have to think about is maybe the rumors may spread a bit faster in a smaller community than in a big city.
Yeah, thanks, Carmela. And then I guess a spin off to that is a question about if you have to deal with any discrimination because of your ethnicity or coming from a big city, you know, labeled as the big city, you know, practitioner. Did you experience any of that?
You know, me and Olivia are giggling back and forth because I think we both experienced our own, maybe her being in a smaller space, she might have felt it a bit more. I'll just speak about what I felt, especially from going from UBC, which I think is so open and so forward and advanced in their language and inclusiveness, and then just going back and going into a small town. Some of that language isn't there, and I did get a lot of questions about what am I, and I was used to answering those types of questions back home. Going to UBC, I didn't have to worry about that at all. And then I kind of got reminded of people mean well, but they're genuinely curious, but just not in advance in their maybe socially correct language. So just being ready how to navigate those. But we definitely felt that sometimes our patients didn't know how to say certain things or how to place things, or that was just the culture of it. And just be ready for navigating those types of conversations, or maybe just experiencing some racism. And as long as you don't feel any malice from it, you kind of find your own way and your own dialogue to navigate it. But that was something that we got better at throughout the summer. And we ended up laughing them off most of the time. Some of them are really funny, but you definitely experience that. From my experience.
Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking off of what Carmela was saying about like being ready to face the culture here. No, I'm very obviously like Asian. My fiance is non-binary and very forward about their opinion about being non-binary. Coming here again, we were very concerned about like the conservative culture here and how we would be received. And definitely in some situations, like we just have to meet patients where they are. So for example, like, I have a patient who is, if I have patients who are severely demented, have severe dementia and harbor, prejudice against somebody who is a visible minority, then I kind of have to like figure out how to work with that and not take it personally. And then I feel like having your supervisor's support is also really important. Like just letting them know ahead of time. It's like, hey, I'm like experiencing this roadblock in my practice. Like, is this the appropriate way to go about it? What are some alternatives? Like, maybe can you have a coworker take over for you? Like things like that. But honestly, like I don't feel like I've experienced more racism here than I have in Vancouver. And if anything, people here, I feel like a lot of it is just it's just curiosity, honestly, a lot of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Tara. That's a great way to talk about meeting people where they're at. And Carmela, it is quite a culture difference, coming from UBC where people are very careful and, have the supports and the education around inclusive language. And those supports and education don't exist everywhere. So I think that's a really important piece. There is a bit of chatter around support, financial support. And I know certain disciplines do have small stipends that are available for students. But I also wanted to make you aware of the ROPE site, because I have curated a number of financial supports and loan forgiveness programs that are available for specific disciplines within designated rural communities. So I invite you to check those out on the ROPE site because a lot of people aren't aware of these amazing opportunities to get some financial support. I actually have a question that is really pragmatic. It's about, knowing what you know now and talking to yourself before you embarked on this placement, what would you tell yourself? How would you prepare yourself differently, or were you really happy about certain ways you prepared for your placement? Can you share that wisdom with those who have not yet gone?
Maybe I'll start. I feel like there's so many things I could say, but kind of kiddingly, I'd probably be like, you could probably pack less, it's fine. But I think that one of the big things I would tell myself if I could go back in time would probably be to try and see, and maybe this is different for kinesiology and just based off of where I was, but I think I would have tried to maybe establish like what infrastructure and what pieces there were already in place in order to support the work we were about to do. Because I feel like there was a bit of like lost time where we could have maybe started earlier and helped people quicker, faster, and in a more effective way if we had known what was already there. So I think that's probably one of the bigger learnings in regards to like healthcare that I would have told myself. I think the second thing is that I think that knowing what I know now, consistency and continuity is so key and pivotal in, I think, a smaller community. I think what I saw with like a locum model for physicians and doctors, where it's like they fly in and they fly out. I don't necessarily that is like think that's the best. And so I myself have now moved forward thinking that like that's not who I want to be. So if I ever do go back up north, I think that it's like to stay, and I have to make an impact that will hopefully be a little bit longer, because I think that that just means better care. So I think those are things I would tell myself.
Thanks so much, Olivia. I want to just jump off something that Cassidy said, and this is something that I found when I interviewed so many students that had gone on rural and remote placements. One of the things that was a bit of a surprise for people was the transportation. And, you know, just not having a real concept about like distance and weather and, you know, how that impacts transportation when you're in rural and remote. And so, again, at the rope site, I did curate some resources. There is the, at least for the northern community, there's the Northern Health bus that is available for students who are on placement with a letter verifying that they're on placement. They can ride that bus, you know, from Prince George to Terrace, or, you know, maybe not up to Niska, Olivia, but, you know, there are, you know, there's several routes for that health bus, and that is a free bus. And so, you know, that is one option. But again, getting around in town, I know I have a friend who lives in Vernon who uses his e-bike everywhere, because that's just, you know, how he chooses to get around. It's small enough. And there's a lot of nice bike paths and so forth. So, but yeah, knowing that the transportation bit, and then kind of figuring out, like, you know, I've also had students tell me they bought a vehicle, they bought an old clunker, and then they sold it after their placement, which I thought was really, you know, brave and innovative. And Tara, over to you.
Yeah, so definitely be like, in terms of transportation, like I did not realize how spoiled we were in Vancouver with our public transit until I moved out of Vancouver. And one of the things about being in small towns and like places with very diverse terrain, like across these different rural placements, is that you have to be open-minded about how you travel. So for example, like it's minus like 25 degrees outside here right now. It's like a foot of snow. And one of the ways that I am seriously considering for travel is, yes, I do have a car, but I don't like driving everywhere. It's cross-country skiing to work, because that is a thing that people do here. And apparently in winter, you know, you can snowmobile down the main road and get places that way. And I've heard that in the western side of the Northern Health, there are people who canoe to work because they live on a high island that's away from the hospital. Yeah, cross-country skiing to a birth, yes. But Be creative. See what the local people do. Just literally ask them, oh, I don't want to drive, or oh, how do you get around? Like, I've seen people ride horses down the main road here too.
Love it. Love it. Any other comments before? There's one other thing that came out of the focus groups that I wanted to share also about wisdom going rural. And I mean, Tara alluded to it earlier. You know, figure out, like, can you get the favorite coffee bean that you like, or the, you know, the favorite foods, and stock up. Even moving from the north to Vancouver, one of the things that I noticed that Olivia talked about is the food planning mentality that you are in. You know, when COVID struck, it wasn't a big deal for my family because I'm in the 6-month mentality. You know, my house is already stocked up always 6 months in advance, because I lived in the winter, you know, and you just do these things, and you have a freezer, and you can, and you do stuff like that. So I think that is, I guess, one thing to kind of be prepared is if you like certain things and you want to get that certain marmalade, bring it on up with you, or bring it where you go, and but also be willing to try new things like Hulacan, right, Olivia? And foods that you don't necessarily get, that you find that, wow, I've been missing out on things that I didn't know existed. So so I think that's one of the things I want to bring up for the focus group. The other question I wanted to just ask is, in terms of collaboration, a lot of these collaborations that you spoke about in your testimonials really happen sort of naturally and seem to be welcomed. But perhaps for folks who are coming from, you know, contexts where collaborations don't necessarily exist, how can students make the most of those collaborations, those interprofessional learning experiences right off the bat? You know, what would you suggest for those students to really start making those linkages?
If the opportunity to collaborate with other professionals isn't right there in your placement, if you do work alongside someone, or if you end up having a coffee shop that you like to go to every day, or the grocery store, one thing that I really noticed is people have time to say hello and have a quick chat with you in smaller towns. That's what I really felt. And when they see you day after day, they're happy to share why they continue to live where they live. So just ask, what do you like about this? Or if there is another healthcare professional, why did you end up ultimately choosing this? And then they just talk, and they tell you all those great things that you couldn't find on the internet. And that's also where I found the invitations came to, oh, come fishing and try this. Oh, let's go on this hike. And people are more than happy to share the home that they chose with you. And then on a professional note, if you have someone that works close to your profession, they're also happy to save you the time and the heartache and those little tricks of the trade that you can only really learn after doing it your own way and finding your own way. So just talking to people, which I really enjoy doing. And I was really happy to feel that everyone around me had time to talk. So sometimes I feel like that's lost in a bigger city. Everyone seems to be on the go, and you only have so much time. But in the smaller towns, the pace is a bit slower, and people have time to share their experience. So take advantage of that.
Thanks so much, Carmela, and thanks for joining us. And if you have to hop off, thanks again.
I was just going to say, we were really fortunate that when we came to the healthcare center in the largest village or community, because nobody knew us, we had that opportunity to really share, like, this is what we do, this is how we can try and help, or where could we fit in order to support the services and programs you're already delivering. And so, yeah, like as Carmela said, it's about trying to like just put yourself out there and really try to understand what everybody else also does. We were also really fortunate to have what they call CCHRs in each community, or cultural community health representatives. And so in some ways, they were also a really great link in order to give us a little bit more insight as to who everybody else was and what they were doing, so that we could insert in a way that was meaningful, given that everybody is super busy. So yeah, just I think just putting yourself out there and then really trying to not market yourself, but try and have other people understand your service, I think is also very important. So it's a bit of a give and take.
Wow. Thanks so much, Olivia. Tara, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so like basically what Olivia said is what I was going to say. And the way I really put this into practice back when I was a student, and I still do this now, is I invite myself to things. So like now, back when I was a student, I'd invite myself via my preceptor, be like, hey, that healthcare professional is doing a thing that I don't know. Like, can I shadow them for a day? Or, hey, you're attending this care conference. I don't know what that is. Can I go? Or now I'll just talk to the relevant healthcare provider. Like, maybe I'll talk with a social worker and be like, hey, I hear you're having a family meeting for so-and-so. I feel like I might have some good advice. Can I come? So really just putting yourself out there, like Olivia said.
Amazing. Thanks for those encouraging words and giving people, the students particularly, the courage to do that, because it is scary going to a new place and meeting new people and putting yourself out there. And but just know, like, you're so valued in rural and remote communities. I can't tell you, that was an overwhelming theme from every preceptor I interviewed, and that we're getting into, big numbers, particularly when we think about, the number of healthcare providers proportionally in rural and remote. So we've got a couple minutes left. Any closing remarks before we wind down? Any last minute words?
I was going to say, I can't tell if everybody here is like interested in going rural, like they're already interested, so they came here to basically validate it, or they're like, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. So let's see what the other experiences were like. But I think despite whichever camp you're in, I think that you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to challenge you and make you grow as a person. And so I think that no matter what you decide or wherever you get placed, just think of it as an opportunity to either learn something new and really like it, or learn about it and then it's okay not to like it too. So I think just put yourself out there and try to make the most of the opportunity, because it might surprise you on how awesome it actually is.
Thanks, Olivia. Well, it's 6:27, and I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. We want some nice work-life balance, and we're probably getting close to dinner, those of you who haven't eaten already. So I just a really warm hand for our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for our participants for joining us. This has been a great discussion. It's just been so lovely to hear all of your stories and your experiences, and we hope to do this next year. So those of you who are on rural placements, we'll be putting out a call again and welcoming all who want to participate, because it's just so important to get the word out. So thanks again, and have a lovely evening. And we'll be posting this on the Rural Action Space, as well as probably a link on the ROPE site for folks who are looking for resources around rural and remote placements. And we're hoping to build our studio of media around this. So thanks again, and have a lovely evening.